Angels, spiritual beings that have been encountered by cultures going all the way back to the Sumerians. Strange, winged beings, sometimes beings of fire. But what are angels? Why has no one been able to classify them yet? Why has nobody been able to sit down and explain exactly what these things are? Also, why was one guy in the Middle Ages so obsessed with how many could dance on the head of a pin? Angels are a complex and complicated topic. So let's talk about it as we walk together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christo-Pagan Druid and Priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christo-Pagan Druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
And today we're going to be talking about angels because we've talked a bit about the other crowd. One of the things that I am continuously surprised by in my energy work and work with the other world is how there are clear, distinct classifications of spirits. Like there are kinds of spirits. The other crowd is extremely diverse, but you can always tell when you're dealing with one of the other crowd. Angels are extremely diverse, but you can always tell when you're dealing with an angel. Demons are a whole thing. Not going to be talking about demons today. That's a lot. With all the difference and diversity that exists within the genus, species, whatever the proper terminology would be here, they all share certain qualities in common, certain ways of being in common. And yet, we do not have a singular, clear, understanding explanation or hierarchy for how angels are organized, how they work. And I thought it would be a good place to start with angels to talk about why. Because angels aren't organized in hierarchies. They're organized in anarchies. Before we get into that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the app is you're listening to us on. We do original Christo-Pagan and Druid episodes 5 days a week, and we've got a lot of fun stuff planned, and you don't want to miss anything. All right, let's just get into it. Angels.
Yeah, I think that is where a lot of the angst comes in when people try to stick to an Aristotelian archetype structure, which, once again, it's a Hellenistic plot. It is. It's this old, rigid structure that people try to apply that, yes, science has gotten it to work when it comes to classifying like species, but there's still problems even there with that, because once again, it's a over 2,000-year-old, 3,000-year-old thought structure that we're still trying to use today. We just aren't honest enough to admit that it's that old and it works-ish. Like, you just have to accept that it works-ish, or, like you said, it's more of that anarchistic perspective of it's a system that needs to be held on to what works and let go of the things that don't.
So, first of all, just to explain, when I say has science figured it out, there is a paradigm shift happening in science right now between the way we used to classify things and the way we're classifying things going forward, because some things that we thought were separate species can actually interbreed with each other and have viable offspring, which is, by definition, not separate species, but they're so far apart from each other, they might as well be. There's a lot of conversation about what is a species and how do we organize the tree of life going on right now. I'm not saying that science isn't real. Please don't take that from what I said.
Klingons and humans are having babies. Oh no! Just for the Star Trek fans.
So many things to say about Star Trek's understanding of...
Well, yeah.
Angels and angelology, basically for most people, is going to break down to one of two things. And these are not the only classification structures that are out there. There are so many. I'm actually fond of what we find in John Dee's writings and works when we talk about the heptarchy and all of his work with the angels. But that's a whole completely other topic. Most people are probably going to encounter either the celestial hierarchies of Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, who, by the way, Dionysius the Areopagite was a person mentioned in the book of Acts as somebody who converted because of a sermon of St. Paul's. About 300 to 500 years later, somebody wrote a series of books in his name, and that's the celestial hierarchy, the divine names, the ecclesiastical hierarchy, and mystical theology. Good books, really interesting books. If that's a topics you're interested in, some fascinating stuff there. But in his celestial hierarchies, he outlines the classic 9 choirs of angels that you may have come upon, with the seraphim, the cherubim, all the way down to the archangels and the angels being at the bottom of the tree. I've always found it interesting that he put archangels at the bottom of the tree. That's interesting. I think there's a whole topic that we could go into there, but we're trying to do a more general overview right now. So try to be simple.
Opportunity to go into the comments and request for more on specific parts.
Right. But it's the one that you'll find used in most movies, TV shows, and books because it's fairly accessible. He lays out 9 choirs of angels in a very specific order from closest to God to furthest from God in kind of concentric circles out. And basically the ones that are closest to God, the seraphim and the cherubim and them, are more related to working directly with the divine, whereas the angels and archangels are more likely to interact with humans. And so if you look at his angelology as a spectrum of what is working in the divine, celestial, higher spheres of reality and what's working in the lower, more mundane spheres of reality, it can be fairly useful. But of course, he presents this as a kind of strict, rigid hierarchy. So he would actually say that seraphim are actually higher than archangels and That's a whole thing in and of itself. The other one that you may be familiar with, especially if you have encountered discussion of angels in any magical text, is the work of the mystical Kabbalah, which is not to be confused with the Jewish Kabbalah. Hermetic Kabbalah and Jewish Kabbalah actually kind of emerged at around the same time. In about the 1500s, there was a lot of conversation back and forth between a lot of Hermeticists and rabbis who were a part of the development of early Kabbalah, and they took very different paths. Very different paths. They have a lot of similarities. They have some places where they hook up with each other. I think that they are compatible with each other. They're dialects of the same language, but they were kind of born together and separated and went their own different ways. Intelligible to one another to a point, but different purposes and uses and what have you. In there, you'll see the angels and the various orders of angels associated with the 10 spheres of creation, the 10 sephirot, or svirot, depending on which pronunciation. If you want a more proper Hebrew pronunciation, it's svirot. If you want the one that the Golden Dawn, for example, popularized, it's sephiroth. I go back and forth because I learned from both sources, so those are the same word. In this system, we have 10 orders of angels that are mentioned. They have some similarities to the 9 celestial spheres, but one, there's an archangel at each of the 10 spheres, much more reminiscent of what we would see in the older Hechelot spirituality, where they kind of function as the guardian overseer of each sphere of creation. And some of the choirs have absolutely no relationship whatsoever to the celestial hierarchies. The Eralim, for example, the angels of the Malkuth, the lowest of the celestial spheres, the one that we live in, means the burning ones. There is nothing like them. Nothing like them at all in the celestial hierarchies of Dionysus. And in some ways, they're kind of akin to saying the saints, because they are kind of the holy ones that have passed beyond, but complexity, we're just trying to be simple here. Now, the tree of life, as it's used in the Hermetic Kabbalah, I love this phrase that Enfys book uses, which is it's become a mystical filing cabinet, because that's kind of how Hermetic Kabbalah treats the tree of life. It's about correspondences, what corresponds to each sphere, each path, each world. It really
is. It's Dewey Decimal System.
Yes. Which again, very different from what you would find in Jewish Kabbalah.
Yeah.
It is useful in that, yes, if you were doing things under the sphere of Malkut, you're more likely to encounter the Eralim. You're more likely to encounter Sandalphon, who is the archangel of Mal. Yes, that is very much the energy, the vibe, if you will, of this 10th Sephira. Hang on, again, language of pronunciation. But they're not of it in the same way that we would say, like, this is their home address of it. Again, it's a system of categorization that helps us kind of wrap our heads around things that are harder for us to understand. And as long as we're approaching any of these systemic lists of angels, orders of angels, with an understanding that it is trying to give us a way to make this useful knowledge rather than book knowledge, it's not telling us much really about the classification of each of these angels, right? The Archangel Raphael. Is Raphael a member of the Onaphim? Is Raphael a member of the Erolim? Is Raphael a member of the Cherubim or the Seraphim? I have seen Raphael put in all of these choirs of angels that are very generally described as quite distinct and different from each other. But it's because these are various writers trying to wrap their heads around the various activities that Raphael participates in. And so if you were dealing with Raphael in this sense, yeah, he's more akin to this choir than that choir or that choir. It's about usefulness more than it is about scientifically classifying the angels. Now, why is any of this important? I tend to agree with Rabbi David Cooper that angels fizz into existence and tend to dissolve back into the basic energy of the world. To me, one of the basic differences between an angel and one of the other crowd. The other crowd typically have personalities of their own, interests of their own, lives of their own. They're not waiting for humans to act. They are spiritual entities that are doing their own thing.
This is something also I think differentiates when you're dealing with ancestors who have gone beyond as well.
Yeah.
Because they have their own source of action, their own goals, intentions, ambitions, desires. And so that sense, I don't necessarily want to use the word autonomy because it's not exactly the right word for that, but that sense is still there.
I think autonomy works.
Yeah.
They're acting from their own interests, their own goal.
I think this is why there are a lot of references in the Bible to free will. And I think this is actually where some of that distinction starts to come in. That quote unquote, well, not quote unquote, but the gift of free will, even as a person passes on, that continues in their spirit. And they have that ability to make those choices, to exercise that free will.
And this is one of the points of contention between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam over whether or not angels have free will. Most saints, sages, and scholars who approach this question will say no. And then you have problems of, well, if we're going to say Lucifer is a fallen angel, Lucifer obviously had free will. So how does that work? In Islam, this character is a jinn, not an angel. And there is an angel who falls, and it's because basically orders were in conflict with each other. I was ordered to worship God alone. You then told me to bow to humans, the incompatible orders, and basically has a 503 error out of God's grace.
Even when you look at, like when you go back to our episode where we're talking about history of the devil and stuff, in a way, for those that ascribe to the school of thought that angels are more of an energy, so if they're principalities and powers, right? They are systems in and of themselves. They are constructs of a system. They're coalescing energies of a system. So the original devil was a system of contrarianism. It was the Sitra Achra, the other side. And so therefore, it was doing exactly as it was ordered to do by God. It was created to question everything. And that in of itself is not bad or evil. It is what it is. And so I think that's where a lot of people get themselves caught up because they try to conflate all these devils in history into one entity. And when doing that, it's like, yeah, that's where you have all this conflict. Because if you separate them out, as we tried to demonstrate in the history of the devil episode, so when this conflation occurs, that's where the issues occur. Because the original devil could very well still be an angel, because their entire energy is that questioning. And at least in my headcanon, a handful of them are probably fallen individuals or other folk type that they, through their own bad choices, because they had that as a person that had passed on, maybe already made a bunch of bad choices, then passed on and continued to make them. Uh, because that's one of the other things. It gets into nuance, but the whole like how malleable is the soul once it has passed on is a whole other conversation.
When you talk about how malleable a spirit is, in some schools of Solomonic magic, the difference between an angel and a demon is what level is the spirit acting on. That these are actually different faces of the same spirit, almost akin to but different from the wrathful and peaceful faces of various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in Buddhism. That they are different aspects of the same energy that's kind of acting as a spectrum itself. And so if you're interacting on this side, you're dealing with the angelic form. If you're interacting with it on this side, you're dealing with the demonic form. And it's actually the same energy. It's the same being.
As we've talked about at the various times we've talked about evil, it's that whole thing, a lion eating a gazelle is just natural. It's what it do. But if it eats your best friend, it's evil. And I understand that desire to want to call it evil, but it is still working within its energies, within its parameters, so to speak.
But this is why angelology is complex, because when we're dealing with most angelic topics, why are archangels so prevalent? Because Raphael is the archangel of healing. Healing is a universal energy that is present everywhere. And so I can be having a conversation with the Archangel Raphael here, while somebody in Spain or Italy is also having a conversation, because we are all invoking that energy. It is Raphael, as far as an archangel is concerned, is not an individual being. It is this healing energy, which is a constant, and thus not just an angel that blips in and out of existence as necessary from this kind of animistic energy that flows throughout the cosmos. It is this higher energy that is much more distilled. And we see this with all of the archangels. Zadkiel is the archangel of loving kindness and pretty much love in and of itself. Again, a much more universal energy, one that is constantly being invoked somewhere in some way. So unlike normal angels that would blip in and out of existence, there's a more steady stream of energy being invoked. Okay. Don't know how to say it clearer than that. But that's what makes dealing with angels and trying to systematize them extremely difficult, because if they are energies that come in and out of being. And remember, the definition of angel in almost every language that we find a word for it is messenger. These are energies that blip in and out. Message is sent, received, and then the energy decays back into nothing. Rabbi Cooper would also say demons are the same thing. An angel is basically a positive energy that is bringing some good, blessing, or other power to bear on this side. A demon would be a more negative energy that's trying to work on the other side. If you stub your toe, did a demon make you do it? Yes, because the negative circumstances all conspired such a way to create an energy that allowed for the stubbing of your toe and then dissipate it. You don't have a demon just sitting there. And this is where demonology gets really complex, and we can do an episode on that in the future, because there's a difference between the Sarium, the Shadium, and just demons. But that's a whole other topic in and of itself. So it's important for us to embrace this very anarchistic understanding of angels and angelology, in that depending on what you're doing, the purpose of what you're doing, why you need the information, different systems can be right in that specific situation that would be wrong in a different situation.
And I think the last little bit of complexity to throw onto this pyre that we have burning here of life is confusing, angelology is weird, is take into consideration. Quantum physics gets into a lot of fun with this. Schrodinger's cat brings up the idea, and quantum physics talks about how when we measure a thing, it becomes that. Like, is it a wave or is it a point? It's both until we measure it, then it is one or the other. We also were taught in our traditions, as above, so below.
Yeah.
So that is also in our traditions telling us once we measure a thing, we can make it the same. It becomes the same. So what we unmeasure, what we loose on earth, what we unmeasure on earth, we loose on earth, we loose in heaven. And what we measure on earth, we measure in heaven. Basically, to clarify this old phrase
As clarifying
as clarifying as making another whole episode out of that, right? So we have to remember that as we try to put these classifications in, we may be creating classification structures that didn't exist or won't exist in the future as things are measured and unmeasured, because they may actually be both and. And this is also why it's so important to just accept a more fluid structure, so that as our tradition tells us, we need to try to observe things for as they are, not the structures we imply or force upon it or try to force it into. Even though it fits in the shoebox, we all can see the edges are busted out and it's no longer a nice, pretty square.
Or as my grandfather used to say, not everything that fits in a shoebox is a shoe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not everything fits in a shoebox is a shoe. To help reinforce the why you should adopt a more fluid mindset on this is so that if you are going around and when you are having these encounters, you can collect the data points that you actually need to collect with as little bias imposed into it as possible.
I'm not even sure that this is one of those things we should be collecting data points on. And the reason I say that is I think the fluid nature of these things, what's important for us to understand is what system are we operating in? Because sometimes we're in the realm of the planetary angels.
Yeah.
And that's a whole system we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah.
Because yes, there are many, many ways to classify angels and how angels are organized. And if you are dealing with something in the realm of the planetary angels and you realize, oh, this is a Saturnian angel, which does not mean that it's an angel that came from Saturn. It means that the symbolic meanings that are associated with Saturn are ascribed to a subset of them are ascribed to this entity that you were interacting with. Then working through any other system of angelology is not going to be as effective and not going to help you get where you're wanting to go. And I think this is one of the biggest problems that people have when they're trying to do their magic is they're trying to pick one or the other. And do planetary angels have a place? Sometimes, yes. If you're doing a lot of astrology-based work, yeah, they probably are much more important to you than they are to someone like me. I am not doing a lot of astrology-based work. I'm doing much more nature seasonal work. And so I find that using the Tree of Life tends to work better. Sometimes doing certain forms of ceremonial magic, system that we find in Pseudo-Dionysius might actually work better for you. If you're doing Solomonic magic, you should be using that system of angelology when you're thinking of the correspondences for not only the spirit you're working with, but other associated spirits in connection to them. This is one of those places where having that ability to both and realize that it's not going to fit nice and neatly into a box really does help you out and will help to get rid of some of the intramural argumentation that happens where, oh, no, the Enochian system has it right. No, the Solomonic system has it right. No, Dionysus has it right. No, fill in the blank of all the myriad names that we haven't even gotten into yet has it right. None of them have it right. All of them have it working in a specific context.
To reinforce what you're saying is to put this into the realm of science to help clarify and reinforce what Charlie's saying there is think of it in terms of you don't have botanists and biologists and mineralogists arguing that their system is the right system of science. One's dealing with rocks and minerals, one's dealing with plants, and one's dealing with animals. And they all sit back and they go, well, if I'm dealing with an animal, I should be working in the biology realm. If I'm working with the plant, it should be more botany realm. But they also have more fluidity between them.
I think there's even a simpler way to put it. It's Newtonian physics versus quantum physics.
Yeah.
Was Newton right about how gravity works? No. Newton was absolutely wrong about how gravity works. But when dealing at large scales, Newtonian math works better and easier to predict where a body's going to be than any of the other systems that we have. So we'll still use the Newtonian equations and not some of the other quantum physics equations, because at a higher level of mass, at a higher scale, they function better. And that's really what we're talking about here, is realizing, or maybe even a simpler way to put it, sometimes you're given the measurements in metric and sometimes you're given them in imperial. You're all saying the same thing. It's just I'm using yards, you're using meters, and 1 yard is not exactly 1 meter. And we're all talking about the same thing, just using just different systems to get there.
And let's stop laughing at the guy over there measuring things in cubits. It's okay.
So many qubits. Why are there so many kinds of qubits? And now we've added a new qubit because we're calling the things in the quantum computer a qubit. So now there's even another kind of qubit. Spelled different, but still.
Qubit comedy.
Qubit, the measurement that will not go away. I hope that this has helped you out a little bit and actually confused you some, because that really is the point of this. And you may be thinking, but wait, what? I think the biggest problem that we have when dealing with angels and spirits and talking about any of these topics is people get locked into a system and then try to fit everything into that system. And they're like, I have a square, but it's going to fit into this round hole. Now, sometimes you need to be using the round holes for the round pegs and the square holes for the square pegs. It's fine. It's fine. They're all wooden blocks. In the end, they're all wooden blocks. It's fine.
I'm not here to judge you for using your shoebox by filling it full of pencils or filling it full of prepped food. It's a shoebox. It's okay. It's okay.
Do you have a favorite system of angelology? Because again, we have only scratched the surface of the many, 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 many schools of angelology that are out there. If you do, let us know in the comments. Or if you have any other thoughts on this, or if you have any episodes, we've kind of hinted at like 1,000 other episodes we could do on this topic because it is deep. Let us know in the comments. If you're listening to us on Spotify or YouTube, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they won't let us know. So leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationspast.com, click on chat, and there you can leave us a comment, and we will be able to see it and get back to you. And while you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships over there. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am Sue Dorset on both, and that money goes to help keep the power on, a roof over our heads, and food on our table. Thank you so much to everybody who does that. Y'all are amazing. And if you don't have any money right now, or if you're not sure if you want to give us any of your hard-earned treasure, I completely understand. But if you know anybody you think would benefit from any of the episodes that we've done, please share it with them. That helps us out more than you know. And as we are heading out, Blessed Solomon, who according to the school of thought is either the wisest man who ever lived, the greatest fool who sought wisdom, or the most powerful magus to ever invoke the spirits, help us to understand how we should deal with the angels and demons that we encounter in everyday life, and to see them as the energies that they are, that we may, like you, build a ring of power to help us have control over the parts of our life that we can control, and realize when we need to let alone what we cannot control. Amen.
Amen.